Good evening. I'm Socrates, Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi in the We Believe Broadcasting Studio. You know, I like to say Mississippi is my hometown. The air is just a little bit cleaner and the grass is just a little bit greener. Down south in Mississippi, I remember when my cousins would come from Chicago and St. Louis during the summer, and they would be so happy to get to Mississippi where they could see some real live animals. And we would ride on hay rides, and we'd ride horses, and we'd go fishing. And they just didn't have any of those experiences up in Chicago and St. Louis. And so it was a treat for them to come home, and we loved to have them when they came home as well, down south in Mississippi. Now, it wasn't that long ago that their parents were running from Mississippi. You know, we were trying to get out of here as fast as we possibly could. Blacks were migrating to the north, not for the Industrial Revolution, but to get away from the pain of the South. Most people think it was the Industrial Revolution that moved them north, but it wasn't. It was the mere fact that they were catching holy hell down here in Mississippi and other southern states. And so we had that dichotomy. It's good to leave when you have to, and it's good to come back on visits, etc. But in Mississippi is where I have remained. I have stayed here most of my life. You know, we were educated and we served in the Army and we visited all the other states, spent a lot of time on the West Coast, etc. But at the end of the day, I had to come back to the motherland, to ground zero, right here in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and family and send us stars. It's critically important to us. If you're watching us on YouTube, then go on and subscribe to the program. We're in the middle of a subscription campaign, and we need your involvement and support. Now, if you're watching us on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, then we want you to share the program with your friends and families, but also hit the donate button. Send us some cash. We need that to be able to finance all of the good work that we're currently doing. Now, if you want to be involved in this program, you can call us at 800-492-5186. You can join in our conversation, or you can ask us to allow you to be remoted in as one of our guests, or you can come in the studio with Dr. Henderson and I and join the conversation. I want to send appreciation out to Adrian Stuckey that was with us on our last show. You know, I've gotten a lot of comments about that show, and the young lady seemed to have held her own, sitting between two giants in terms of Dr. Henderson and myself. But she was not intimidated, and she made some great points about the differences in the generations and why they act the way that they do. We're going to revisit some of that tonight. But as always, it's good to have with me my co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson. Now, he's a man who needs no introduction. I always say he's a dangerous man because he escaped from the plantation, having been born on the plantation in the Mississippi Delta, and escaped when he became 18 years old. He ran away. Or he was sent away by his parents, who wanted him to have a better life than they could afford up there in the Mississippi Delta. But having been born there didn't mean that's where he ended up. He's street smart and he's highly educated, and that makes him dangerous. Dr. Henderson, it's always good having you in the studio with me, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Socrates. I'm still learning and I'm still thinking, sir, about the various things that made me move from the plantation to what I call the upstairs in the mansion. And that was hard work, some religion, influence, cooperation, and help, H-E-L-P, unexpected help from individuals and groups that knew more about me than I knew about myself. That says, that boy might have something going on, I am going to help him. And I didn't even know that. And people were pushing me on. And one day, after I turned about 35 or 40, I realized that I didn't get anywhere by myself. It was always someone else. And that's what I do today, try to tell people that they can change if they work hard, if they pray, if they get with the right people, and if they listen, and then think, and then prepare to do better every day.
Now, Doc, that sounds like the traditional American philosophy that you can be anything in America, that, if you stay in school, work hard, etc. But many Americans, especially African Americans, are finding that that's just a pipe dream, that in fact you cannot be anything that you want to, and that there is a glass ceiling, or a ceiling, may not even be glass, that keeps most of our folk in poverty and economic deprivation and uneducated and locked up a lot.
Well, now that is partially true. There is a glass ceiling. But when you get something called the glass breaker, you can get around through or under that glass ceiling. This happened during slavery. There were many slaves that bought their freedom, ended up owning plantations, owning their own businesses, buying slaves themselves. There were others that were brainwashed and told you better not make any attempt to even get close to the glass ceiling, and you better not leave. And if you hear of anybody getting ready to leave this plantation, you better tell me. Those are the slaves that hated themselves. Those were the slaves that wouldn't leave if you put them in a space big as the state of Mississippi without a guard. They would just work and wait to die so they can get that so-called peace up in heaven. That's the difference.
Now, Doc, I've been watching a series on Planet Earth on Netflix, and I've been watching the evolution of the world, of the planet, and how it changed and how it purges itself, and how, all of the animals that we go back and look at all the historic features of animals and how they've changed, and through no fault of their own, it seems as if God, the creator of the planet, has a plan that starts the ecology all over again, that he wipes man out after a period of time, that he changes the earth, he changes the cedars of Lebanon are now called the Sahara Desert. He changes the forms of things, and inside of that he changes the heart of man. I'm finding this series to be quite interesting.
Well, it is. It is partially true. There are a lot of links that are missing. And what man usually does, he looks at things, and anything he can't figure out, he invents it. And then he starts saying what possibly happened, what could have happened. And then when he finds more evidence, he will get back looking at the script that he already invented in his mind as to how things were done. He may tell you 10 years ago or 10,000 years ago that man crossed from one country on a land bridge. He can do the research later and find, no, that didn't happen. Man left one country on a boat that he built himself and traveled around to the continents. Both are true. But people don't know all the facts until there's discovery. Just as if you are in a criminal case and you are guilty in your mind, and there are some facts that show that even though you had to take permitted action against someone, when you defended yourself, it was only because you were defending yourself that you had to shoot that person, because he had a weapon on you first, he told you he was going to kill you, and you defended yourself. That's the difference.
Well, that's a tremendous difference. Now, I want to talk about differences tonight. That's one of the things that I gotta try to get inside of and try to get our people out there a better understanding of the differences and why things exist as the way they do. And so I want to start with a couple of things. I want to know if there's a difference between education and training.
Oh, yes.
Now, you know, I've heard the old term, and you've heard the old term, that you can be educated and not trained. And you even might say that one can be educated beyond his ability to do anything.
That is a fact.
You would call them
an educated fool. That's what I would call it. And many have done that throughout the years.
Educated fool.
That's right.
How can one be educated and be a fool?
It's very simple. One can learn so much until he can't do what he has been taught. And he's not smart enough to learn the skills he needs to survive. So he's what I call a book knowledge person. He has no practical skills, he has no certifications, and he's always talking about how things ought to be. People like me, he says, can't get ahead. I went to school for 50 years. That's what he would say. He would say, for instance, it's 1930 in America. I went to law school for 10 years. I went to medical school for 15 years. And when I finished and went back to my state, I couldn't even get a job working for anyone.
Well, now, Doc, that may be true, because I recall somewhere in my career, a gentleman off of the streets. I had some opportunity to work in the community, and I had a job with Xerox Corporation. I was actually branch sales manager for Xerox Corporation, had about 65 employees in 5 states. But on occasions, you know, I like to go down in the community, down at Buttermilk Bottom. So I spent a lot of time down on Ferris Street in Jackson, and then Mobile Street down in Hattiesburg and places like that. And on one occasion, a gentleman told me, he said, "Socrates, you are well trained, but you're not educated." And I was offended by that. You know, I have my college degree, and that offended me. And I said, "Explain that." He said, "Well, for example, if I ask you why did they build the pyramids in Africa, you wouldn't know. But if I ask you how to develop a strategic plan and connect the dots, you've been trained to do that." And I had to think about that for a moment. Maybe I am more trained than educated. Maybe we take both kinds to make this thing work. But let me ask you that little test question that I was asked.
Okay.
Why did they build the pyramids in Africa?
Well, let me tell you the real fact. You know, I told you, miseducation is when you don't have what we call the real, actual facts that made things happen. I've done a lot of reading throughout the years about why they made the pyramids and who made them. There are so many missteps there and misinformation until it's disgraceful. Some books say the pyramids were made by man. Others say pyramids were made by Africans. When the Europeans invaded Africa and that part of the country, they say the Africans didn't do it. They were made by aliens. And many books that I've read throughout the years had information in it to show how the aliens put those stones together without mortar. they couldn't think of the fact that a black man or black men could go and cut a stone out of a prairie with simple man-made tools, drag those or roll those stones and put them on an earth's surface that they build and drag them up and put them in the right spot without concrete and go thousands of feet in the air and have an infrastructure and chambers that were going in a circular manner with all kind of storage rooms on various floors with all kind of artifacts. And they haven't found them all today. Whether you are upgrading knowledge, every time you dig some more, that's what a miseducation will do for you. So anytime man doesn't know everything, he creates what he doesn't know and accuse someone of being the inventor of that.
So the structure of the pyramids is one of the great phenomenons of the day. And how were people able to do that with no tools?
Well, they're saying now, I read something recently about that, say the engineers today couldn't even replicate how they build that pyramid, and said it would take thousands of them to duplicate that with the most current artificial intelligence that they have currently, and still might not be as well done.
So my people, African descent, were some of the smartest people that the world's ever seen.
That's a historical fact. And a lot of that same smartness is within the subconscious of black people today worldwide. But most black people I know have been beaten so long, have been miseducated, misguided, oppressed, humiliated, drugged, criminalized, until they believe that's just what they are. A negative non-entity, that I am not important. I can't do anything for myself. I just survive and I just pray and just hope things get better without work.
Wow. Now, that's a tremendous beatdown to bring you from being the smartest people in the world into a person who has absolutely no confidence in themselves today. That's a long way to travel.
It is, most certainly. But see, all of that can be reversed. That can be reversed.
How can
and
it
I've
be
been
reversed?
talking about it for years. If something happened, if man made something happen through education or miseducation or through having the knowledge and skills to make changes, and if he created something that's turned out to be a problem, all you have to do is correct it by using the reverse order. And any human problem that man created can be resolved with a plan and an agenda, and you can start seeing significant changes in 30, 60, 90 days if you have the problem, who suffered, who gained, and of course, why did it happen? To reverse it, you look at the possible solutions. How did one gain from my demise? What did he do to take my resources? Reverse that process. Why did I have no opportunity for 400 years in America, in the Caribbean, in other countries throughout the world? What did I do? Why was I able to not want to resist? Look at those reasons. Did anyone make an attempt to resist this state of nature that we were in? What happened to them? Do I want that to happen to me? Those are the questions you have to address and decide that you are going to take the positive side, whether you survived or not, because you're looking for the future. You're supposed to look for yourself first, your family second, your community third, and about 10 generations thereafter by planning 5, 10, 30, 50-year plans with long-term goals and objectives. But you always put them 30, 60, 90 days.
And you think that a beat down man can do this?
He most certainly can.
You think that a man that has been kept down, told that he was irrelevant, told that he was insignificant, told that he couldn't do anything, told that he was ugly, told that, nobody loved him, you think that individual can reverse his position?
I know he can. I know something like that. I met a man like that a few months ago. I know a man that's alive today. At 16, he is alleged that he made a mistake. He got hooked up in some criminal activity and went to prison. Stayed in prison almost 30 years in the state of Mississippi. And during his first 15 years, he was abused, subjugated. I call it generally, in my terminology, messed over by the prisoners, by the guards, by the administrators, and told that he couldn't do anything. They wouldn't even allow him to go to school while he was in prison because he was a young boy, scared to death. He had to defend himself, so he didn't have a good record the first period during his incarceration. The young man finally got an opportunity to get into class. He was transferred. He got him a GED. That's a general education certificate, or GED, equivalent to high school. Later on, he took a few courses from a college. Some of the colleges sometime would go to a prison and teach sociology, a little reading, a little math, something like that. And he served almost 30 years. And when he got out, he didn't even have an ID card. Didn't have transportation. His parents were dead. His other relatives didn't want him. And I met this man in living color a few weeks ago, right here in Jackson, Mississippi. And that man now got out of prison, started to take in-person college courses. A lady he knew from the past that he met that was trying to help him get started is now his wife. This man enrolled in a technical program at a certain educational institution as one of the best students in the program with 30 years in prison. He was so good with his skill until I was even surprised. When he told his story, he ended with, "Now I am the instructor of this skill at this college."
Well, Doc, that's an inspiring story. That's an inspiring story, and I hope that it can be replicated and that methodology that he used can be applied to the general population, because right now, that story comes all too infrequent.
Of course.
And so we have to deal with that. But let me ask you a couple questions. Let's get back to this pyramid thing for just a moment, because when I was told I was uneducated but trained, it offended me, as I said. Now, he told me that the pyramids were created as a great irrigation system. He says that they learned that the water table that is beneath the earth, you have 3 different layers there, and he said that they had used all the water up in the first table, so they wanted to build a magnificent structure that put pressure on the ground at strategic points to make the water table rise, and they would have access to more drinking water. And they did that so often until they turned that land into a desert, because when you remove the last water table, then the land becomes dry. Now, I can't say that was what really happened or not, but it was a theory. And as you point out, when man does not know what happened, he writes what he wants to write.
That's exactly the way you're supposed to do it. Because there's another man, most certainly is not going to believe what you said. He's going to do some investigation and come up with something else. And he is going to prove enough to his satisfaction that he is correct. And it's going to be like this old Booker T. Washington and Du Bois debate about education. Heard about the talented 10th with old Du Bois And old Booker T said, man, no, I'm not interested in telling the truth. All these old black folks that just got out of slavery need to learn a skill. They ought to have a vocation. They ought to just go somewhere and learn something, take care of their family, forget about everything. Say they don't need to be trying to run for governor, be in politics. Matter of fact, all they need to do is vote. But if there's a lot of problems there, don't even worry about that right now. Get a little education and training and use your hands, your mind, and your heart. And just forget about the other things. And this old opponent, Du Bois, he was, what I call the sophisticated young man from parents that had resources. They sent him to college. He worked hard, one of the smartest young men around, ended up at Harvard University. And he was the type that had too much education. You couldn't pay a man like that with a PhD from Harvard University to go out and buy a little farm and raise butter beans, corn, and onions. Not going to do it. And anyone that did that couldn't even spell butter beans, corn, and onions, to him was just totally unnecessary. They didn't have a right to exist. They were uneducated. But the problem could have easily been resolved if those two black guys got together and said, we are both correct. And we're going to use a strategy where I'm going to use my information and share it with you, with those that are just trying to get skills and be able to work and learn something. And I'm going to get my people law degrees, medical degrees. They're going to be accountants, surveyors. They're going to be psychologists. And I'm going to teach your people how to learn and do the things that I've been taught. And then we're going to form a community of knowledge, of skills, of beliefs. And we are going to be the chiefs in this area.
Doc, we're up against a commercial break, and when we come back, I want to know where are the Du Boises and the Booker T. Washingtons of today?
I can tell you.
Well, I'm going to ask you that question specifically because I don't think I know where they are. Now, you're watching Socrates Garrett Live, broadcasting from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the We Believe Broadcasting Studios. If you're watching us on Facebook, share this program with your friends and family and send us stars on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button on WeBelieveDigital.com. Hit the donate button and call us at 800-492-5186 if you want to join in this discussion. Now, we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you of becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're going to get right back in our discussion. We'll have an interesting discussion about the differences in the way we see things and what can be done to solve some of those problems. Now, Doc, we're up against a hard election season here in this country and other states as well. On Tuesday, Mississippi will choose a new leader, or it may choose the same leader to be the governor of this great state of Mississippi. Mississippi hadn't changed regardless of who was leading it, Doc. Is it something that's holding Mississippi back regardless of leadership?
Well, partially true. That's partially true.
And our leadership has been all white. So I would have to say that blacks have not contributed to the downfall of Mississippi, to its remaining last in every major category. I would say that black folks haven't contributed to that.
All the black people have done in Mississippi and in the South is promoted the status quo due to many reasons. One, fear. Number two, the inability to organize themselves. Number three, the inability to select and train their own leaders and go with these appointed people that have been given to them as their saviors. And totally inability to get away from what they've been told to do from others, black and white. So they just float.
So I'm noticing that in other cities, the city of Memphis elected a white man as its mayor. Even up in Leland, Mississippi, Greenville, Mississippi, we see white folk now being elected as mayors. Down in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, replaced the black mayor with a white man as mayor. Is black folk beginning to turn to white folk because they've given up on their own leadership, or is it just white man's time again?
Well, things go in cycles. You know, the Bible said that there's a season for everything. I used to hear it explained a little different. There's a season for every reason. Things going to change. And things change economically, politically, socially, economically, because of one man's or one woman's idea that they start planting a seed. And I told you earlier, if you want something done, you have to have a plan. 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And they start this seed, and they say, we're going to be conservatives, we're going to be liberals, we're going to be racist, we're going to be nationalists, we're going to be one world concept people, we're going to practice equality, on and on and on. And people that's in the positions of power tell these people, you are crazy, this will never happen. We can't do that. 15, 20, 30 years, all of those things are done. Look at how the black people that used to be the second group in America, they could get almost anything they want for about 15 years, starting around 1965. 15 years later, they were down, lower in the pecking order. And today, black folks have no permanent or significant influence in any areas of activity. We are now down at position number 10. You can't get lower than number 10. When you pass the influence level of number 3 in the pecking order in politics, religion, and economic development, it'll take about 300 years for you to get back up to position 1 or 2. That's the situation black folks are in. And that's why I'm telling you the solution to that problem, to get elevated without waiting 300 years, is to look at where you are in your city, in your county, in your state, in your region, in your nation, your position in the world. So wherever you are in the majority, you're supposed to use that Booker T. Washington and Du Bois concepts, merge them together and change and start doing it in 30, 60, and 90 days.
Why aren't we doing that? I mean, in the city of Jackson, we are African-American dominated in terms of the city. It's 85% black. Hinds County is 85% black, and yet we are seeing a continual deterioration in the quality of life for African Americans under black leadership. in the state of Mississippi, 97% of all of the agencies and department heads are held by Europeans, by Caucasians, and the state remains last. Minorities in business and economics get less than 1% of contracts for goods and services. And the racism and the divide is growing bigger and wider every day. Why is that?
Well, that's because of someone decided way before so-called Reconstruction during the 16th and 17th century in America that we are going to form a nation for European males only. European males, and include everyone else. We're going to make the policy. We're going to make the laws and the guidelines. We will make all the decisions in industry. We are going to have our police force, our military, in office or in power to look at our positions of responsibility and keep us in good status. That's the way they were able to do that. And black folks would see that and hear that and observe those type of thinking patterns. And when they would start even thinking about change, they knew that there's something waiting to whip them in line, because they had already found out from their leaders, their owners, their bosses, their overseers, that your job is not to do any thinking. I do your thinking for you. Your job is to work. And if you start thinking and trying to learn something and say something that's going to change your status, I'm going to have something for you. It's going to be a good whipping, a good branding, a good castration, and if you do it 2 or 3 times, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to do it in front of your mama, your friends, your children, and I'm going to make an example of you. And if you do that several times during anyone's life, from 1 year of age to 15 or 16, you impact him negatively for the next 15 or 20 years. He's not going to want to do that. But there's always 1 or 2 that will disregard all of that. And they say to themselves, that's those folks. That's not me. I'm getting out of here. Old Frederick Douglass said that. They beat him when they caught him several times. At one time, he said to his boss, he still wasn't 20 years of age. He said, this is the last whipping I'm going to get. And I know that boss said, something wrong with this boy. Frederick Douglass beat him halfway to death. He escaped. A few days later, when he died, he was one of the greatest black men in the world, the greatest orator, greatest publisher. He had himself self-educated after learning just a little bit, picking up a bit here and a bit there from the white owners' children, when he'd just be sitting around playing in the dirt, and they would be reading and writing, and he had enough sense to listen and try to learn, enough sense to say, that's not right. He didn't even know it was right or not. And they would explain to him, show him how to write those ABCs. You know, he couldn't have his own books, but he had that innate smartness.
Well, I wonder about Frederick Douglass a bit. I believe his daddy was white.
Well, of course, allegedly. He definitely wasn't black. He definitely wasn't black.
He definitely wasn't black.
That's right.
I believe his daddy was white.
That's what some of the books say.
And, well, by looking at him.
Of course.
I don't have to rely on the books.
You really
now.
don't. You really don't.
You know, by looking at him, I can tell that, you know, he's a mixed blood.
That's right. He's what I always like to say, those old mulatto types. And there are a lot of them.
Do you think that those individuals that are mixed bloods are more defiant?
Not necessarily.
Well, Frederick Douglass was.
Well, he was an exception. A lot of those other mixed blood slaves that had mothers and fathers that were Caucasians wanted to be like them. So when they got a chance to get a little freedom, or even before they got out of the slave territory, they wanted to be supervisors on the plantation. Many of them got those jobs. They wanted to be the supervisor within the garden. They wanted to be the head house manager, and then they would hire the other slaves, not hire them, but give them an opportunity to come in and work for them.
They would become the new master.
They were the new masters that dressed in the master's best old clothes.
So instead of wanting to free the least of them, they wanted to become like the master himself.
Well, why not? They want to be like their daddy, like their uncle.
Well, but Frederick Douglass didn't want to be like his daddy.
He despised.
So there's something in there that makes one man go in one direction and the other in another.
That's a fact. I call it inner consciousness.
Inner consciousness.
You just don't feel that it's right. That I just don't believe I can't do better than I'm doing now. I'm getting up early, 5 o'clock, working until 6 or 7 for others, and then have to get back home and survive and go back to work and do the same thing 6 days a week.
I saw on YouTube a pastor, a prominent European Caucasian pastor, praying that God would help Israel kill all Palestinians.
You heard that recently?
I heard that just 2 nights ago. Now, I don't know exactly when he was giving the sermon, but it had to be recent because the conflict is recent.
Well, why are you surprised?
Because there's got to be something in a man that stops him from going there. Like we say, there's something in a man that stops him from forgetting about those people that he see out there suffering every day, and not to want to become their master, but want to, in fact, to be a person that assists them in changing their condition. I think there got to be something in a man that stops him before he requests God's help for another country to kill everybody in another country.
Well, now, let me just tell you the fact on this matter. You might disagree, but this man is doing what's best for him, his family, and his personal institution. Now, if you want to know the real reason, all you need to do is go to his office with some kind of warrant, take his computers and his files, and look at his donation list and see who is financing his church, his operation.
I think his pastor's name is Jim Hagler or something.
I know who you're talking about. I know exactly who you're talking about. Look at his list. Look where he and his groups visit from time to time. Look at the propaganda that he and others are just espousing all over the world.
Well, how does he feel comfortable invoking God into that struggle?
Well, that's not, he doesn't feel uncomfortable.
We say you ought not use the Lord's name in vain. We blacks are afraid can't curse in church. We can't do that. It's something inside of us that says that you can't do that.
Well, that's because you have not been trained like the minister there in Memphis. They have one called a cussing minister, and he has been trained well. He was a former minister, had his own church, had relations with some of the greatest bishops and ministers and elders in his denomination, and he found out he was misguided. And he decided that he was going to change and expose the good and the bad and criticize everybody. So he is doing his job. And this minister you're talking about doing his job, because if he would say that others are supposed to win, and you look at his contribution list and see who is not giving him money and who is, he's going to be talking that's going to favor the people that's keeping him in power. That's what racists do. That's what nationalists do. That's what people do that don't want to lose their status. You go where the wind is blowing the strongest, economically, socially,
and you can
politically.
invoke God to go with you.
God will go with you in your mind. But at the same time, the one that is being punished knows the Bible too, and they are not stupid. And they say, God, you told me that if I do certain things, even though I'm the poor person, I am prosecuted, I am denied, I am almost being crucified every day, Lord, just like you. And you told me that I can be saved. Therefore, I know you're going to protect me against the bombs, the nuclear weapons, the mortars, the Uncle Toms in my group, the informers that's going to be telling the enemy to kill me. But Lord, I'm going to succeed.
Did God protect the dinosaur
Well,
from becoming extinct? Did God protect all of the animals that we lost across the world? We're just a mammal like the rest of the animals. Why would you think that God's going to stand in your favor to help somebody, stop somebody from killing you?
he's not going to do that.
He's not going to do
Well,
that.
of course not. God is going to allow man to kill each other as long as they want to, and one day he's going to get tired of it, and he's going to clean house. He did it once, allegedly. You've heard about the big flood, how he had his prophet out there talking to those folks over there in northeast Africa, talking about you better get straight, say it's going to rain, you need to start getting away from those idol gods. You need to start thinking about yourself and your family and serving the Lord, because something is going to happen to you. And he said it's going to rain. And this fool was out there digging holes in the ground, in the sand, going a long way, dragging poles together, and made a boat. Some called it a ship. And the people in his area were laughing at him and calling him an old fool, say he must be crazy.
Well, I understood he was an alcoholic.
That's what some say. Not the type using the same ingredients we use today, but he had problems. He was, even though that was an allegation, it might have not been true. When you start talking something that others can't see, they're going to accuse you of all kinds of things.
Why would God choose him?
Because he knew he was a real God-loving man. He probably was chosen by God to be able to handle that kind of criticism, because God had it in his subconscious to be his disciple, to be his general, to be his order taker, to make things change. And he kept on building that boat, dragging those long poles, told his sons and others, go out there and find me 2 animals of the same kind, a male and female, and bring them up in here. And I'm going to go down to the nearest town and talk to those idol worshippers down there and tell them they better repent. And he would go down, and I bet they would laugh at it. Here come that old fool again. And then, when that rain started, folks were so happy. They praised God. We haven't had a good rain in 40 years. They kept on boogalooing and enjoying life, committing adultery, praying to those idol gods. And one day, they looked around. 2 days had passed. The water was rising. And then they thought about that boat. And those devils, those evildoers, those God haters, start thinking, there is a salvation plan out there, and we have been told that there's something for us. So we got to go and get on the boat. And those boys, all of those sinners, start knocking on the door. And I bet old Noah told his son, lock the door, boy. That's what my daddy would say. Lock the door, boy, so we got to go. We have a plan. And that's why God decided to get rid of man. And he started again. That's why he got rid of the dinosaurs. They were getting too big. They were eating too many other animals. And he caused some climate change to happen. He's working on that again. Man is not going to be around forever. I told you last week, our change will not be the flood. Our change is going to be what we talked about just yesterday. that semi-crazy idea that I was criticized all last night up until about 8 o'clock. And today, when I said it appears that we are just at the beginning of World War III, Part 1. Today I heard and read that additional nations are fighting in this Palestinian and Israeli war. The United States, Lebanon, Egypt, some people in Iran and other places where a lot of those freedom fighters are living. And you know, our people, the United States leaders, have pledged billions of dollars, and now they're going to get it all and more because they have a speaker now in the House, so that money is going to be flowing. And more nations going to get involved. I noticed today, I was reading, you got Russia now on the side of the Palestinians. China is being real smart, and they are using that old American tactic where they're going to let the Russians, the Europeans, and the Americans fight this thing out, and then the Chinese going to come in and capture all the spoils. And then they're going to do like the Europeans did after World War I and World War II. The Chinese then are going to rule the world. And that's why I've been telling you all for years, and I've been criticized for it. Black folks, there are two things you need to learn. You better teach your children Spanish and Chinese languages.
Now, Doc.
That's what I've been telling them for a long time.
Doc, I need to learn black folks' language because I got a feeling that we're going to have to come together to survive.
Of course. You have the right feeling.
And we need our own language to do that. And this unity that we have, this divide that's inside of the African American psyche, we got to deal with that. We got to figure out. We know how it got there. I mean, you've done a good job explaining how it got there. It was intentionally put there, but to reverse it is a little bit more difficult. I understand your procedure of solving a problem by reversing the way that it occurred.
That's right.
But in the case of racism, no one will allow you to reverse that. You see, you recall that over 780,000 soldiers gave their life in the Civil War, fighting to keep black folk in slavery. Now, it wasn't just so black folks could be enslaved, it was about economics of the South. To hold on to that standard and that quality of life and those dollars, all things were expendable. My sons and my daughters, 780,000.
Well, sir, it's the same way today. Those same folks are our senators, members in the House of Representatives, our college presidents, our captains of industry, the relatives of those same people that had that idea that black people are dispensable. Their cousins, their grandchildren, great-grandchildren are governors, college presidents, as I told you, great faculty members, great entertainers, great preachers right here in Mississippi, in the South, in the nation. And you just mentioned one earlier. So the thing is, who cares who is killed if I can maintain my order, if I can maintain my economic advantage, if I can just maintain it? I don't care about others dying as long as I don't die and my loved ones.
Wow. Now, Doc, let me ask you this. You and I are born in Mississippi. We have more knowledge about Mississippi than most people. How do you think white folk feel about black folk in Mississippi?
Well, those that I know usually tell you how they feel by their inaction. Now, there are a few from my experience, and I'm going to give you some examples in a few minutes. We don't have a few minutes. And so we ought to do this in part two later on. But
We will.
anyway, there are a lot of good white folks out here in Mississippi, in the South, in the nation, in the world. And there are some bad ones. And I'm going to talk about both at our next session.
Doc,
Because I heard the bill.
our time is come and gone. Now, if you're watching us out there, you know that the conversations and the dialogue and the content that you're witnessing here in this studio is not heard anywhere else on mainstream media. No dialogue, no conversations are going forth that's dealing with the issues and the sensitivity of the issues, the hard issues that we deal with right here on We Believe Digital Broadcasting Network. We need you to join us. We need you to have input. We need to find a solution. We need to bring folk together. We need to widen. We need to stop the widening and the gap that is widening every day between the poor and the rich and the haves and the have-nots and the broken down. And we need to deal with how we uplift and change things in this state of Mississippi. Now, it can be done. But you're going to have a real desire, and you're going to have to be shown that it benefits you for you to change. See, we recognize that the leadership in Mississippi today has no justification for changing anything because they think that anything that benefits black folk in the state of Mississippi will hurt them in some way. And that's why that in Mississippi, one of maybe 13 states that have not expanded Medicaid to its citizens, even though Mississippi is the poorest state in the entire nation, we refuse to accept Medicaid expansion in this state. And we refuse that for only one reason, and that is because it was called Obamacare. Now, if you call it the Affordable Care Act, most white people would say, I'm for that. But if you ask them what do they think about Obamacare, they would tell you, man, that is absolutely no good. I'm reminded you that Chris Rock said in one of his presentations today that there is no white man in the world that wants to change places with me, and I am filthy rich. There is not one white person that desires to change places with me. And so we got a big issue here that we got to deal with and deal with and deal with it until we can make some headway into how we solve this problem and bring blacks and whites together. Now, Doc says we need to learn to speak Spanish and Chinese. I'm going to have to deal with that a little bit later on because I think that we got to learn how to speak to our brothers and sisters in the great state of Mississippi. I think that if we could demonstrate that we can come together in Mississippi, ground zero, that the rest of the world would take notice and change its ways. Doc, it's always good having you in the studio. How can people get in touch with you? I can tell you that in our comments and our feedback that we're getting on our shows, people are asking how do they get in touch with Dr. Henderson?
Well, as you know, it's very simple. All one has to do is call us directly, 601-201-1957. Folks, listeners and viewers, the number is 601-201-1957, or you can call 1-800-492-5186, and you also have other media sources like CLU369@gmail.com. Or you can go and pull up WeBelieveDigital.com, and there's contact information. And of course, we will come as a small team and talk to you and tell you how you can change your life, your status, your family, your community, starting in 30, 60, 90 days in 5 areas of activity. And if you do this and pool your resources, train your own leaders, and we're going to talk about this next week. I'm going to tell you what your leaders done for you and why they're keeping you in the state of nature now that is not good for your future. And you are to blame for that. We're going to talk about that next week. But if you want to hear the real versions of what we talk about, call us, 601-201-1957.
That's it for this evening's program. We want you to stay safe out there and be encouraged. Until next time, good night.
Looking for the hottest content in the city of Jackson and surrounding areas? Check out WeBelieveDigital.com. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We Believe Digital Podcast is here for all your podcasting needs.